All right, it looks like we're live somehow miraculously after trials unknown to most of you. You just if I told you everything already for me this morning that had gone sideways, you'd be amazed that we're here live. My guest today is Tsufit, and I'm just going to have her tell us what we're going to learn today because I've been so scrambling just to be here late that I don't even know what we're learning today.
Well, I don't know exactly what we're going to learn because it's going to depend on what you ask me. Because I'm going to leave it to you to interview me. But basically, what I have been helping people with for 19, 18, however many years it's been, has been how to step into the spotlight and get noticed, how to get seen, get heard, get noticed, get known.
That's good.
Yeah, anything you want to ask me about that, I'm here.
Okay, great. So is it fair to say then that you specialize in visibility?
Yeah, visibility, credibility, the it thing that will make people to, come to you when they see you. I mean, it's not enough to be visible. You've got to also attract them once they see you.
Yes, so true, so true.
Yeah.
Let's talk, pardon me. Let's talk a little bit about that. What is the it thing? Like that's
well, the it thing, okay, that's kind of hard to start with the it thing because some people say you're born with it, and other people say it can be developed. I mean, even Elvis, though. Okay, Elvis. And by the way, I saw him at a convenience store last Friday. Actually, it wasn't last Friday because we were in quarantine last Friday. It was a few weeks before that.
He was with Tupac, right?
So anyway, even he had a little bit of a hard time in the beginning. And the same thing with what's the Man in Black? They made a movie about him. Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash.
Same thing. Okay, and it's actually the same guy. Sam Phillips, was it Nashville or Memphis? Anyway, Nashville.
Yeah.
I think. I don't know. Whatever. Memphis. Sun Studios. Look it up. They were both kind of trying to sound like everybody else. I think with Johnny Cash, it was, he was singing hymns, and with Elvis, he was trying to sound like Bing Crosby or whoever was popular in that day, right?
Yeah.
And it was really only in both cases, and I know because I've seen the docudramas, and they're always true, right, Manny? So, right?
There's one thing you can count on. Yeah.
Count on the docudramas to be true, right? So in the Elvis one, they did this whole recording session, and it was really bad. And then in the end, Elvis was kind of fooling around with his sidemen, playing, I don't know, That's All Right, Mama, or whatever it was. And he goes, "That's it. That's your sound," right? So that was his it, but he didn't get his it till 2 years into it. So sometimes you got to dig deep in and find your inner Elvis. And I just re-saw the Johnny Cash movie. It was kind of the same story with the same guy. Sam Phillips. Oh, I hate that. I hate that tagline, by the way, what you got there now. The Quarantine All-Stars. Just a moment of honesty.
Well, that's what it is, lady.
No, it's gone. Yeah, it's gone. Thank you. As long as I don't have to see it. So, and no, because I don't feel quarantined. I don't feel contained. I feel free here. Anyway, so, and with Johnny Cash, it was kind of the same thing. He sounded like everybody else, and he said, "Well, I did write this thing about a prison," and he ended up recording, live in San Quentin, live at whatever. So for all of us, I mean, you could be an accountant, okay? Thanks, it's back. You could be accountant, and let's be honest, there's nothing really much more boring than that, other than maybe an actuarial scientist, which is kind of the elite of the account. But if you can kind of find an angle and an audience and so what's an angle? So I made a little list of things. So you're a coach, right? And we've got like 17.5 quadrillion coaches on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on social media, and they all sound the same, and they all look the same, and they all say the same stuff, right? What do they say? I'm going to help you break through the barriers. I'm going to help you make the transformation you've been made. I'm going to help you be seen in the world. I'm going to help you, I mean, you know what they say because, everybody says it, right? So there's kind of a few things you got to do. First of all, you got to define your audience more narrowly than everyone, which we all know because all the coaches are saying that. So that's nothing new to anybody. And then we got to find that audience, and then we got to attract that audience, and then we got to do the fourth thing, which I'll tell you later, because that's the most important thing that nobody does. And then you got to do the fifth thing, which is nurture them, and we all know that. And the sixth thing is have an offer ready, and we all know that. The fourth thing is we got to put them somewhere. Okay, and nobody talks about it, nobody does it. So, but let's go back to the first one. We got to define your audience. So what does it mean to define your audience? I'm not talking about that I'm for women, you know, or I'm for entrepreneurs, or I'm for small business owners, because that's, again, what everybody says.
That's, yeah, you might as well say I'm for humans. Yeah.
Exactamundo. So what would be a good example? You are a coach for priests who fall in love. Okay. Now you're not going to have a quadrillion people lining up for you, but you can get internationally known for that, right? I had a client who coached straight spouses who were married to gay men. And, you know, she herself, her story was that, you know, I think she's married like 27 years. She had grown kids with this guy. And one day, honey, we got to talk. I mean, I'm laughing, but it's so sad, right?
Yeah.
But Lemon's Lemonade, she, you know, she wrote a book and she made it her thing. She was already a coach, a therapist. You might as well, you know, use it. Or a coach for prison guards who fall in love with their prisonees. What do you call that? Inmates. Prisonees. I heard they're letting them go now to make room for more quarantine. Anyway, in some countries. So if you can get that kind of narrow, and of course everybody's afraid to get that kind of narrow, right? They say, well, like, how am I going to do that? Nobody's going to be there. But there's this other chick, I don't know exactly who she is, but she delivers packages, again with the prison. She delivers packages to care packages to people in prison so their loved ones can send them. I don't know if they're putting a file in the cake, you know, like in the, but anyway, so that kind of particular definition of an audience already is the first step to this whole thing. And then, okay, so that's number one. And if you guys have pens,
so let's stop there and explore that for a minute, because I don't want to just go right by that. There's a couple of places I want to go with this. One is, I absolutely agree with you. People resist niching down, and corollarily to that, even those who do often don't go deep enough. So how do we, like, besides the fear part, you know, I mean, everyone I work with at some point in our conversation seems to say, they don't come out and say it, but they say words together that mean, I'm afraid that if I get too specific, I'll miss out on my audience.
I won't have any clients.
I won't have any clients.
Right. And I'm still trying to get over the corollarily.
Yeah, that was not easy to say, by the way.
That was yeah.
I'm not even sure that's a real word. That's how.
Corollary is a word. I'm not sure if corollarily is, but we're going to go with it. We've both used it now, and it only takes two people to add something to a language. And in fact, actually, that's interesting because Oxford English Dictionary, you're listening, right? And in fact, that's how a lot of language comes to us. But back to your point. Everyone's afraid. We're all afraid. With good reason, because if you're not smart enough to find or lucky enough or whatever enough, corollarily enough to find, if you're not successful enough to find that particular audience, then you're going to sit there with no clients, and you're going to tell yourself the lie that it's because you went too narrow. Duh. It's not because you went too narrow. It's because you don't know how to market. It's because you don't know how to attract. It's because you don't know how to do the other things that we're going to discuss today. But if you are narrow enough, now I'm not saying that you should be the coach to trapeze artists, because even though that's probably a thing, it might be a little harder to find trapeze artists. But if you are a coach if you coach anger management for physicians, which, you know, a member of my LinkedIn group did, that's okay. I mean, there are a lot of physicians and a lot of them are angry. I mean, especially now, but you know, even before this, right? Like they've got big egos, they've got that God complex. So that could work, and it does work for him. He's very successful with that, and he's known internationally. There's another guy who is known as the lie guy. And he teaches people and police departments and everybody else how to detect when people are lying. So yeah, it's narrow. So we're narrow in topic now rather than in audience. I mean, you can choose to be narrow in topic. So you can choose to be narrow in audience. Ideally, you want to do both, but at least you have to do one or the other.
That's a level that I've taken people to, is that you can you can go narrow in topic, and that I don't hear talked about much. I want to figure out the magical question to get the most tactical clarity from you I can for everybody watching, because this is such a big one. It's like starting the race on a 50-lane road versus a 1-lane road or something, some analogy like that. And I think that there's nothing sexy to the process of finding a really specific niche. And I think that especially with the explosion of online coaching, and therefore the explosion of people who do what I do actually, but do it differently than I do it. I help coaches to find leads and get business. Basically, I help coaches make more money. That's what I do. But there are so many people on the sidelines who are doing a version of what I do, who are shouting at you, and they're using, perhaps misusing, the ethical principles of persuasion, because you see that all over the copywriting. It's tired of this. This doesn't work. This has gone bust. This is the new thing. That kind of feeling, when you hear it over and over and over and over again, makes you tend to doubt everything.
Yeah. Well, now that we're in lockdown, as you say, on house arrest.
House arrest, baby.
There is no better. Actually, that'd make a great song for Elvis.
It would, yeah. Or Johnny Cash, for that matter.
He did Jailhouse Rock.
Yeah.
Yeah, house arrest.
House arrest rock. Yeah.
So, yes, you make a very good point. It's not sexy. It's not sexy, but if you don't do it, it's just not going to work. Okay.
Yeah.
It's just not going to work. And I'm not worried about other people. I mean, it doesn't even penetrate at all what other people are doing in terms of the shiny thing and the thing of the week, because it all goes back to foundational principles. It goes back to Al Reese in positioning. He talks about, like, it's like there's a chest of drawers, right? And if Coca-Cola has one drawer, you're not going to do very well to oust Coca-Cola from that drawer. They're already there, right? So you come up with the Uncola, something that's different, so you get a different drawer. So it's like, where are you putting yourself in the marketplace?
Yeah.
So let's say you're a cleaning company. Okay. How can you possibly distinguish yourself as a cleaning company? I mean, how? I mean, it's a pretty generic thing, right? It's a commodity business, right?
Yeah.
It could be this one, it could be that one. Well, I heard of a company that managed to do it. You know what they do? I mean, it's not pretty. I wouldn't want to do it. But they call themselves crime scene cleaners.
Yeah.
I mean, right? That's narrow, right? Yeah. It's a narrow, specific thing. Now, hopefully they don't have repeat customers, but they probably do. I mean, the police department, whatever it is, right? So you can do this regardless of what your business is. There's another guy who, everybody's teaching negotiation, right? Everybody's teaching negotiation. Well, I mean, a lot of people are. I'm not. A lot of people are. But what if you are a hostage negotiator? That's a different thing, right? People off buildings or bank, whatever it is. Again, that's a topic specialty, or you could do an audience specialty, right? Yeah. Where you serve aggressive physicians, or you serve, priests who fall in love, or whatever crazy thing you want to do. But what doesn't work, coaches, is or entrepreneurs in general, is the generic break through the barrier stuff, is the accountants saying they'll help you, or the financial planners are the worst, with the, help you for retirement, and like,
it's devoid of any kind of personal anything. No, I get it. Yeah. So then,
number one is you got to define it. Number two is you got to find them, right?
Yeah.
So, if I'm selling steaks, I'm not going to show up to the Vegan Society annual meeting, because it doesn't matter how good my pitch is.
Right.
That's not my audience, right? So you got to find them. A great way to find them is to find other people's audiences. People talk all the time about other people's money, OPM, OPA, other people's audiences. Right now, I am being introduced to Manny's audience. You're being introduced to my audience. It's nice when there's a synergy like that. If you can find a room full of people, or now a virtual room full of people, who are your audience, then you can share them there. The third thing is to attract, and this is, really what I've spent almost 20 years teaching people how to do. And it's not something we can, go very deep into quickly, although, I did write 288 pages about how to do that. The fourth thing is the thing that everybody misses. And the fourth thing is, what do you do with these people once you've defined them, you found them, you've attracted them? What do you do with them, right? And this is the step that everybody misses. You got to put them somewhere, right? You got to think almost physically, like put them in a room, put them in a box. Like Dan Kennedy was one of my marketing mentors. He has a word that people really get offended by. He calls his people a herd. Right? Like Seth Godin calls them a tribe, and you can call them your flock, or whatever you want to call these people. Call them something and put them in a pond if they're your fish. Right. And he calls them a herd, and he wants to herd them in like on a ranch, and he doesn't want to let them out. Like, I mean, it's not like you don't let them out. Well, now none of us can go anywhere anyway, but you got to put them somewhere. And so where do you put them? Where do you put them? Well, Manny's put them in a Facebook group, and I've put them in my LinkedIn group. Right. Because so somebody runs into me and they say, "Oh, Tsufit, I read your book. I love your stuff." I say, "Well, that's great, but there are a lot of other authors who, could have the same compliment, and then all they can do is say thank you." Well, I can say thank you, and then I have two other things to say. One is, come join my Step into the Spotlight group on LinkedIn. I'm putting them in my pond. Number two, I can say, go to my Spotlight Secret series. And then I have people on there for 14 years now. 14 years. It's an autoresponder series, right? I'm up to like 3 years worth of messages. So they get to the end of the 3 years, and I put them back on. And I keep adding to it. So I have two places to put them. And so I guess what I'm asking your audience is, if you're doing number one, you've defined yourself and you're all thrilled that you know what your niche is, right? And number two, you found them and you've attracted them. Figure out, what can you do to hold them? Because we all know that there are New York Times bestselling authors who release a second book and they don't know how to send an email to that audience to tell them about it, right? The fifth thing, obviously, is to nurture them. Everybody talks about that. And the sixth thing is to have an offer ready for when they show up and they say, "Tsufit, I loved your book. What
I'm
more
ready
can
to
I
buy
do with you?" And and how can I work with you? And most coaches and authors and speakers will say, "Well, it kind of depends, or what's your pricing?" Well, it depends. And then they enter this whole discussion. And the whole thing about being a coach, a speaker, an author, a leader is, you're supposed to guide people. You're supposed to tell them what to do. You're supposed to tell them where to go. And I know a lot of coaches get offended. And by the way, I'm not a typical coach. I'm not Coachy Coacherson. I have no credentials after my name. I made it all up. I'm not bona fide. I'm not certified. I have no corollary. Anyway.
Can't even say it.
Corollary. I used to be a lawyer, so that was a very popular word there. Anyway, so but the point is, you're supposed to boss people around, because that actually attracts people. And most coaches will tell you the opposite, that the coachee, the client, has all the answers and you're just a facilitator, bring it out.
That's just a therapist.
That's just, I mean, I was just
Yeah.
going to say bull, whatever, but like, that's ridiculous. I mean, like, to me, a coach is like, okay, I don't want to say that's ridiculous because I'm offending half your audience, but
Isn't that niching
you know
down,
who you
though?
are. Yeah, I'm niching down. I'm polarizing my audience right
That's
here.
right.
You don't like it.
That's
See,
right.
and you know who's really great at this? Larry Wingett is really great at this. He wrote a bunch of really offensive books with really offensive titles, like "It's Your Own Damn Fault." And I mean, look, you guys elected a president who understands and I'm not going to get political,
polarizing
but he understands
better than
polarize your audience. I
Yeah.
mean, his opposition doesn't understand. His opposition 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 12 years ago wanted everybody to like them. Well, how's that working out for you?
Right.
You know, you can get elected with 30-something% of your audience, which, you know, is more or less, I think, what happened, if you can be polarizing enough. So for all the coaches, authors, speakers, whatever it is that, you know, whoever is listening to this right now, not everybody's going to like you. And if you don't polarize in the way that we're talking about, good luck.
Let's make this the thing we focus on today. Because
whatever it is, I agree.
Yeah, because that's polarizing. How do you polarize without feeling gratuitous? And here's the reason I ask, because there's a level of people in the process of becoming better at what they do and attracting an audience who are willing to be polarizing, but most of their examples are people like Donald Trump, and they say either, yeah, so I'll just go out there and I'll sling epithets and you know, I'll insult people and stuff like that. And look, guys, better or worse, like him or hate him, you're not qualified to do that the way he does it. Like, you have to understand, you don't have, I don't like him personally, so the polarization works on me, but I see what he does. And I know that he does it at a level that is incredibly high.
It's genius. And you know what else? There was actually a study during the election when there were 17 Republican, and don't worry, I'm not gonna get political here. I'm just gonna tell you the facts, ma'am. There was a study of brain waves during the time that there were 17 candidates for the Republican nominee, right? There was him and Rubio and Schmubio and all of them, right? Jeb Bush, who was supposed to get it. And they studied brainwaves of Democrats, Republicans, people who liked him, people who hated him. And the result was the same, that everyone got excited when he was talking. Like, everyone responded to him, whether they liked him or hated him. He was polarizing, and that was attractive. So it's just a thing. It just is. It's not like it should be or it shouldn't be. It just is. So you can, you know, I mean, if you look, I watched a series on whatever our Canadian version of public television is here about dictators. And it was called The Dictator's Playbook. And there wasn't one about your current president, but 99% of what they said could have applied. Yeah, I mean, other than the killing thousands or quadrillions of people, which the other examples did, and he doesn't. But everything else he did, you know, like, I mean, you know, against the media, and there were lots of great examples. Anyway, I want to respond to your question. You asked, how can you do it without, I think when you used the word gratuitous, you meant like kind of like that gratuitous sex scene that really doesn't belong in the movie, but they threw it in so they would have a sex scene, right? Like, how, like, you're just throwing stuff out there.
Let me get really specific for you, because I think that this could potentially help people. There are a lot of people who go, I get it, polarization is important, but the examples they have of what it means to be polarizing are distasteful and so off-putting. They're so polarized by it. They don't want to do that. They don't want to do that. Yeah, myself included. Now, I've figured out.
It wants to be like that.
I've figured out, I think, how to sort of just, and I don't like the word authentic at all. I'll use it to get us through this moment. I had figured out how to sort of authentically be polarizing without it feeling like I'm just going, ha, you suck. Okay, you can come in, you know, without it being so over the top like a circus show. But I think people really struggle with that. And I think
okay,
there's
I'll
an
give you an example. I'll give you
yeah, there's an important swath of the entrepreneurial population that really has a hard time. It's like, how do I do this knowing it's important and knowing I need it?
Okay, so that's a really good question, and your vocabulary is very
Vocabularious.
colorful. A swath. I haven't heard that for a while. Okay, so here's an example of somebody who is very polarizing. He's actually much more polarizing, I think, in private, but in public he's not as polarizing. But it really were, and actually, ironically, I think he was probably an early student of Dan Kennedy's. I may be wrong about that, but I'm rarely wrong about anything. You see, there's a polarizing comment. Yeah, Dan kind of admitted to me that. Anyway, so this person wanted to sell a $200 board game. So he wrote a book, because you can't sell a board game for $200, right?
Right.
So he wrote a book to sell it. And the book was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm talking about Robert Kiyosaki.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. How did Robert Kiyosaki get international publicity? He did it by making a declaration. And he was interviewed about this all over the world on radio, and they fought with him on the radio and TV about this. And his declaration was, your house is not an asset. So he's talking to people. So this is a perfect example to it. So this is not something that, like Donald Trump or like or Don Rickles or even Larry Winget, that's so offensive that whatever, right? So polarizing, right? He just made a statement that actually, I mean, in the 50s, right? You had to buy the little house in the suburbs and the 2 cars, and you had made it. That was the American dream. And still to this day, that was the dream, to own your own house. And all the banks and all the people said, your house is the biggest asset you will ever own.
Right.
Along comes Robert Kiyosaki and says, excuse me, your house is not an asset. And then he defined what an asset is on these radio shows. He said an asset is something that puts money into your pocket, right? Your house takes money out of your pocket, right? You have to pay the municipal tax, you have to pay the maintenance, whatever. He said a rental property is an asset. A vending machine is an asset. A storage facility is an asset. But your house, that biggest thing that you ever paid for, is not an asset. And Arnold Schwarzenegger probably agrees with him, because story was that Arnold Schwarzenegger used to sleep on couches of his friends and bought rental properties instead of buying a place to live.
Right.
So that he would have a guy in Canada also used to live in a basement, or a crappy little basement apartment, and used to buy rental properties. So they would have agreed with that. But it was so upsetting to suburbia and middle class America that this go, well, who the hell are you saying my house is not an asset? I mean, I'm schlepping and working, and and you're telling me that my biggest asset is not an asset, and I have really no assets because I'm in debt for this house. So this guy, Robert Kiyosaki, got international publicity, and he was on radio shows, and the people would fight with him. The radio show hosts would personally fight with him on the show, and it worked for him. So that's a perfect example of how you do that. Now, there's another company in the U.S. who did it in a way that did offend some people, but I still think it was a smart thing to do. There was a company that sold fans for like auditoriums and big arenas, and they had some boring name like, I don't know, so and so A and B HVAC, like every company like that does, right? But colloquially, which is a relative of corollary, people used to refer to them at, you look like somebody on TV. I'm trying to figure out who it is. By the end of this thing, I'll figure out it's an actor. Anyway, people used to just colloquially refer to them as big ass fans, because you guys sell these big ass fans, ASS. And they had this marketing person said, everybody's already calling you Big S fans. Why don't you change your boring name, which was blah, 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 HVAC, change it to Big Ass Fans. And they said, we can't do that. People will be offended. And the marketing guy said, you got to do that. People will be offended, right?
Right.
So they ended up on BBC in the UK. They ended up on billboards. They ended up in the news. And people were, and because of their billboard, people were offended and would call it. And what these guys did was genius. On their website, they not only printed all their kudos, all the compliments that people gave them, they also printed all the angry ones, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It became a point of discussion, and the receptionists who would answer the phone were really embarrassed by this name, right? So they'd pick up the phone and say, "Hi, Big O fans," Big O. They'd swallow it. They wouldn't really say it, but it worked, and their company went up. Now you can do it in another way. It doesn't really have to be that polarizing. It could be humor can be kind of polarizing, right? Funny.
Yeah.
So, will it blend? Sells blenders, right? Blendtec blenders. And they had, they're throwing iPods in their blenders. Seth Godin did a spoof of it where he did some stuff that blended. And so that it's a little bit, it's maybe the polarizing isn't exactly the right word, but you're shocking people.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they were shocking people in a non-offensive way. I guess maybe Apple was offended that they're throwing in iPods and the blender was making a smoothie out of it. But that's another way to do it.
So let me share with the audience what I know about how to be polarizing without being an asshole. And some people are fine with that. And the way that I sort of size it up, the way that I talk about it is, look, if your personal brand genuinely is, like, for instance, I say, I coach people, don't be overly political. It's just like, there's just, or like, if you're here to do business on, let's say, Facebook or LinkedIn, and it's a business platform for you, I always tell people to stay away from being politically divisive and to stay away from being, like, as an example, don't have a full thread of vax, anti-vax, just stuff like that. Now, however, do,
same with religion.
Religion. So it's religion, politics, and apparently vaccinations. However, what I see more of, I see a little bit of that. I see a little bit of people who are trying to do business, but will distribute, wildly left wing or wildly right wing. It's propaganda, is what it is at the point, when it's totally just manipulative and subjective, and but more so the problem is in people who are just squarely middle of the road.
That's the total problem, because middle of the road, there's just nobody there for you. There's nobody.
Right.
I want to just pick up on something you just said a minute ago about how to do it without being an asshole, right?
Yeah.
So during that, going back to the 17 Republicans, right, and it was clear to everybody that even though Donald Trump was popular in the beginning, there was no way he was going to be the candidate. Everybody else knew better.
Right.
But when they started noticing that one by one, they started falling off, right? Marco Rubio from Florida said, you know what? Marco's a smart guy. He sees what's going on. He sees what Trump is doing. He sees that it's working to polarize the audience. He sees that it's working to be whatever. So Marco, for about 10 minutes, right, which is maybe a week, I don't know how long he did it, started doing the same thing as Trump.
Yeah.
And he and remember, everybody's making those jokes about Trump has little hands and it means he has little other stuff and all the water and all this. And Marco Rubio did it for a few days, or maybe on one debate or whatever. It bombed, it tanked, it didn't work for him. That's not who Marco Rubio is. It didn't go with his brand. It didn't go with his identity. It was inauthentic. Trump is authentically like that. Trump
Yeah.
has always been like that.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So it wasn't disingenuous. I mean, you either love it or hate it, but at least you're loving or hating the real thing.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
Marco Rubio, there were people hating it, and they weren't even hating the real thing. Right. So Marco apologized. He realized it wasn't him. And that's what it's a perfect example for your audience. This is not going to work if you think, oh, Tsufit says, Manny says, I got to be polarizing. Okay, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to say this and I'm going to do that. But listen, you can be polarized. I mean, again, going back to Elvis and Johnny Cash. Johnny Cash was polarizing, but again, by being his authentic self, right? He wore all black. His band wore all black. They made some little thing about that's the only color they had that matched, but they weren't stupid. They knew what they were doing. He did an album in Folsom Prison. He did an album in San Quentin. He wasn't a choir boy. He had been in jail. He had this low, deep voice. He was an iconoclast. He was different. His life was authentic. If you see the 100% factually true docudrama that we previously referred to, actually they sang their own voices, so I was very impressed by that. But with what's her name and what's his name? Joaquin Phoenix was it? Anyway, whatever. One of the Phoenixes. So it was clear that that's who he was. Okay, this is who I am. So I say things that offend people. Even on my sales page and my thing, it says at the bottom, if you want your coaching wrapped up in a pretty red ribbon, this program is not for you. Manny, you're the same. I can tell already your energy is strong and you don't suffer fools lightly. And they're either going to like you or they're not going to like you. And I kind of have that same thing going on. The thing is, if you try to please everybody, it's not going to work. If you try to offend everybody, it's probably not going to work.
So I think that's the important thing that nobody says, because the vast majority try to please everyone and wonder why they don't get any traction. But then you see a lot of people. Do you remember that that copywriting craze from about 2 years ago where coaches were insulting everybody? Do you remember that, when coaches were like insulting their own people? You want more? Well, I'm sick of it. Get off your ass and do blah, blah, blah. And it just, and I remember it went as fast as it came, because it was horse shit. It's like there's this boss biz babe coach who I wanted to see her copywriting in her funnel. So I got on her email list and I watched her go from clear, articulate, thoughtful copy to this bellicose, you're stupid if you don't buy this. Come on, get off your ass. No excuses. You suck kind of copywriting. And I was like, whoa.
I'm not going to comment about this particular person, because even though I've heard of her, I don't really know. And so no comment on that. You can tell I used to be a lawyer. Disclaimer, 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 waiver, sign here, NDA. But other than that, so no comment. But what I will say is, and the other thing, when you mention copywriters, the first word that pops in my head is boatloads. If the copywriter uses the word boatloads, I've tried it once or twice too. Turn the channel. But because that's what the first word they learn in copywriting school. You know, the ABCs. The B is boatloads. You know, you'll get boatloads of clients. What, they bring clients on boats? I mean, come on. Right. Yeah. 21st century, and we bring clients on boats. Anyway. But yeah, you know what the thing is? I think it's a lack of knowing how to do it. So it's a little bit of desperation. You think, you know what? I tried, just like Marco Rubio. I tried to be Mr. Nice Guy, and it didn't work. Yeah. But you know what? All you have to do is dig a little deeper and find, and it doesn't even have to be polarizing. Okay, Manny and I are talking about polarizing your audience, and that is a great idea, right? But if you're hearing this and you're thinking, look, I don't even know how to begin to do this. It's not me. Forget about that for a second and just look for color. Okay. And people will say to me, Tsufit, well, where do I find the color? Look at your history. Look at what you wanted to be when you were a kid. I had a client who, when she came to me, she had to give a speech to speakers, and she wasn't the speaker herself, but she ran a speaker agency, and her speech was dry and boring. And she came to me and said, Tsufit, my speech is dry and boring. I said, yes, you're right. Give me a few $1,000 and let's see what we can do about it. And so when I interviewed her, I found out that she grew up where? On a tomato farm. So immediately I'm seeing color. I'm thinking, okay, tomatoes are red. I can visualize it. which is the best way to visualize anything.
The best way to visualize anything, yeah.
Corollary.
That's right.
So I said, why don't we make an analogy between speakers and tomatoes? And why don't we say, so what we made up this 30-second thing for her to say, and she also did it in her speech, where some are too green, some are still seedlings, right? So, I forgot the best part. When she was a kid, she used to help her dad pick tomatoes and take them to market, right? So we said, okay, well, it's the same thing that she now does with speakers. Some are too green, she can't take them to market. Some are ripe and plump and juicy and ready for market, and others are just plain rotten. So she used that analogy, and right away when she started speaking, it didn't polarize her audience in the way that we've been discussing, but it did attract her audience, right? They remembered her, right? And so I had another client who was a graphic designer. And what does a graphic designer do? They make logos, and they do websites, and they do brochures and business cards. I know millennials are saying, what's that? But whatever. They used to be these little pieces of paper that people would give each other and whatever.
It was a thing.
It was a thing. It was a thing. It was an official thing. So corollary, you're going to really regret having said that. Oh, and notice the fluidity with which that rolls off my tongue now, right? If you go back to the beginning of this podcast, it wasn't all that fluid for you, Manny.
It wasn't that good.
Not a competition, but I digress. So,
well, that's good because you're still saying it wrong.
I'm still saying it wrong. It's not word, so you can't say it wrong, but we just made the word. Anyway, so this graphic design chick has this company, makes all this boring stuff. And one of the many hundreds of things that she listed between the websites and the brochures was, she said, we make books. And I said, wait, what? You make books? Now, this was before everybody and his dog and his postman made a book, but in those days. So I said to her, wait, okay, that sounds a little more interesting. So why don't we switch it? And so I interviewed her. I found out she grew up on a 600-year-old tomato farm. No, that would be too coincidental. 600-year-old farmhouse in the Swiss Alps. Maybe it wasn't even a farmhouse, a cabin in the Alps at the top of the mountain. And she used to have to go down the mountain to the valley to the library, the only library, because she didn't own any books, to get books. And I said to her, wouldn't it be cool in your infomercial if we said, in your 30-second thing, if we said that your favorite book was Heidi, right? Because, she was a cute little blonde kid with braids, my client. And she said, Tsufit, it was. And why did I suggest that? Because my client's name was Heidi. So anyway, she tells this story. All of a sudden, out of 10 women that she was talking to at this networking event, 8 of them came up and asked for her card. So again, polarizing your audience is a great way to do this. Not all of your listeners are going to want to do this, and not all of you guys are going to want to do this, although it is a great thing to do. But at least find the color, find the flavor, find the story in your life. Find the story. I have another client who's a lawyer, and we just finished, he worked on a book, and he tells the story of when he was playing Monopoly with his sister, and his sister used to hide the pieces, and he threw a shoe at her, and that was the intro to his book about sibling fights in estate matters, right? They're fighting in court over the mom's cottage or whatever. So find your story, find your color, find your flavor, whatever it is. You can't just be another coach, because the world doesn't need another coach to help us break through the barriers.
Right. Yeah. 2 things. One is your sound is getting a little staticky. I don't know if maybe it's. Can you hear that? You don't hear it?
No.
Okay. Best case scenario, it's just in my headphones, and nobody else is hearing.
Or just in your head.
Or just in my head, and nobody else is hearing it. So there's probably nothing we can do about that. I was hoping maybe
you're getting a tiny bit staticky now.
So it might be Facebook being overloaded, or it might be just jiggling your headphone port a little bit.
Here.
That's my guess.
Consider me jiggled.
Okay. So let me move on though. So Rory said he's hearing it too. Okay. So it is.
I hear it on you too. Yeah, I hear it on you when you're talking too.
I want to go stepwise through some things that we can give them right now that will allow them to either be polarizing without it being gratuitous and clown-like and over the top, or at the very least, action steps to find the color and find the uniqueness of their voice. One of the things that is very important when you're thinking about being polarizing, and you immediately think of these over the top, larger than life characters who are, who it would make you uncomfortable to mimic. The first thing I want to say to everybody is you don't have to mimic them.
Right.
What you have to do is get clear on what you stand for. And I would suggest writing a list. And for each thing that you stand for that is really a true thing about you, express its opposite. Like right on the other side of the list, what its opposite is. Because every time you stand for something strongly, you are standing against something else. Now, here's where I think it gets sort of heavy-handed. People will talk at length about the thing they're against. If that makes you uncomfortable, you can just focus on really talking about the things that you stand for. And
it's a lot sexier to talk about what you're against, unfortunately, or fortunately. It just is.
It depends. It depends. And what I want to address is the people, again, who are a little self-conscious of like maybe coming across like a poor man's Trump or a poor man's Boris or a whatever it is, right?
You guys remember American Idol back in the day?
Or a poor man's Simon.
Well, okay. I met Paula, okay? Mm-hmm. Paula Abdul. And I gave her a copy of my book, but I had to excuse myself ahead of time because there was a paragraph in the book about Paula and Simon, and I never imagined when I wrote the book that I would be handing it to Paula, right? So I had to kind of apologize in advance. And I said to her, I'm sorry, Paula, but when you get to this part where I say, Paula likes everybody's tone and Simon's, criticizing everybody, and I said, who do we trust more? We trust Simon more, and who's more, whatever, Simon. And she said, Tsufit, don't worry about it. Everybody says that, and like she has a good sense of humor about it. But the point is, it's true. Paula did not have the same weight on that show and the same, and she was more well known than Simon. I mean, nobody in the U.S. had ever heard of Simon. He was this Brit who came from nowhere. She had a dance career, a singing career, the Michael Jackson thing and whatever. So it just is. I mean, Al Reese, who co-wrote Positioning, which is one of the top books of all time on marketing, says, who's your enemy? There's got to be an enemy, right? It doesn't have to be done in a horrible way, but like it could be the 9 foods you should never eat. Okay, so the enemy is these 9 foods.
Yeah.
Right. So it doesn't have to be obnoxious. Yeah. But it works a lot better to talk about the 9 foods that you should never eat rather than, eat your broccoli.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. And I'm still looking for a distilled takeaway to move the people that I've been talking about, that swath of people, forward with the polarization question so that they can better define their audiences. And while we've covered a lot of great stuff here, I don't feel like we've gotten to that distilled piece yet. That's what I keep trying to come back to.
I'm not sure if this will do it or not. And if not, ask me one more time. But another example out there of polarizing without offending was the Mac versus PC commercials. Mm-hmm. They used to be on TV. You can definitely see them on YouTube. Okay. Yeah. So they personified computers. They took this bumbling kind of Charlie Brown, but really lovable looking, slightly pudgy, overweightish, but not too much guy in an ill-fitting, itchy brown suit. And they made him a PC. Yeah. And then they take, I forget what his name is, in the black T-shirt, Justin Long, was it? Or somebody, some young actor, younger a little bit, not much, cooler, a little bit smug. And they made him the Apple.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Easy, creative, easygoing. Now, they didn't criticize the other one, really.
Right.
They just said, no, if you're complicated and fussy and maybe a little anal, that's your computer. Yeah. If you're cool like me and can wear a black T-shirt on national TV, and you can just plug it in and a 3-year-old can do it, then it's this one, right?
Then
Now,
it's- yeah.
95% of the world at that time, and probably still 80%, most people still use PC. So Apple isn't for everybody. They've never claimed to be for everybody. I remember when I first went to buy a computer, and I would ask people, like, which one do you buy? You know, back in the day. First computer. The PC ones all said you have to buy a PC because there's no software available for Apple. That was back then probably true. But they didn't really care. The Apple ones would take you by the hand and say, no, you have to buy an Apple. Like, they care.
Yeah.
Right? So they polarize their audience not by putting down. They never really put down the other one.
I think this is a good example. So if we could quantify that into a conceptual framework for you out there, coachy coach, who is maybe on the fence and is ready to move to that next level, the beauty of the Apple versus PC campaign that you guys can take now and use. First, I'd say compare and contrast it to Trump politics. And for that matter, Clinton politics. I mean, she got down in the muck too. She was horrible. Yeah. She was. I was just like, are you?
But sorry, I have to say this: a bigger mistake that she made than deplorables or whatever. A bigger mistake that whatever few things she did that were polarizing was the namby-pamby trying to be liked by everybody thing.
Here's the thing.
She thought she would slip through on the everybody wants a woman president thing.
Here's what I want to take from the Hillary Clinton example for people. She changed her stripes blatantly and in front of everyone. That's the thing to take away. First, it was mamby-pamby. Then it was aggressive. Then it was polarizing. None of it felt right.
She was trying to pull Marco Rubio.
Yeah, and none of it felt right.
But I think her biggest mistake was I heard one teensy-weensy little story out of her in the whole 2-year campaign, which was something about her father, I think, did something with fabric, and she showed up and helped. And I'm saying, Hillary, darling, where are your stories? Obama at least was smart enough. Obama wrote a book. I think it was The Audacity of Hope, or one of his books. Mm-hmm. The opening line is, my father was black as pitch, my mother white as milk, or something. Like, he showed color. He showed, and she just policy. I'm a policy wonk. I'm a this, I'm a that. That's not how people's minds work in politics or in business or in coaching. If you're trying to sell your coaching, they're looking for color, they're looking for flavor, they're looking for a connection, a movement, a cause, an identification with something. They're not looking for the thing. They're looking for how they feel. They're looking to feel included, to belong, to be cultish. You talked about propaganda. There's a great book called The Culting of Brands. Mm-hmm. It came out like maybe 30 years, I don't know, an old book. And it talks about how really good brands are like cults. And the example that I gave you before of Apple is a cult. You know who else is like a cult? Harley Davidson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're a member of that cult, right? You wear the jacket. I saw a guy in the parking lot once. He was like a 59-year-old accountant with this, braid, and he's got 17 kids and a mortgage, but he's trying to be James Dean or Elvis or something with his black leather jacket. Yeah. And he's got this honking big Harley. And I said, I went up to him jokingly. I was a little bit afraid to do it, but he was an accountant, right? He had the pencil protector. So I went up to him and I said, he had this big seat, and I said, so where does the 40-inch TV go? And you know what he said to me? Thinking about it. Like he was not a Harley guy, but he wanted to be a Harley guy, right? So that's a cult. Subaru tried to do that, by inviting people to the homecoming and getting to know the mechanic, and they had a 3-day event. So
I got to stop you, because while it's getting too big for a coach to wrap their head around. You're making a great point. I think that if we take Apple and Harley, we can use them as object lessons for the one-man, one-woman shop. Yeah. And so I totally get what you're saying, but I need to just pull it back down to what's sort of boots on the ground for these, because I don't want anybody here going, how the fuck do I be the next Harley Davidson?
What's that got to do with me? Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to also say though that you see it very clearly. I get that, and I love that you really have a bead on it. So let's see if, guys, what I want you to take away from this, what I want you to after the storytelling and the banter and the camaraderie and the energy that we're creating here,
how can you apply it to your coaching?
Yeah, and you had just said something that I think really got to the kernel, to the indivisible, level of it, which is you don't. Oh, it's right there on the tip of my tongue. This
would be a great place for a drum roll.
Or a commercial break.
Little violins, and I would help you out here if I knew what you were going for. But
no, that's okay. That's okay. But
let me say something, and then you can interrupt me, because you always, when somebody else is talking, that's when you remember it. Story. This is what your boots on the ground coach can do.
Yeah.
Find your story.
There you go.
If you don't have a backstory of why you're we all know, I know Jeff Walker's backstory of how he was in MBA school and he quit and he bought a $400 CD. I know Brendan Burchard's story of when he was in the Dominican Republic or wherever, somewhere in the Caribbean, and he had this accident and life's golden ticket. I know the story of the guy who lived in the chicken coop. I know Joe, what's the carpet cleaner? I love you, Joe, and I can't remember your name. Starts with Polish. Joe Polish's story about being a deadbeat broke carpet cleaner, and he learned from Dan Kennedy, and now he's whatever. And I know Dean Graziosi's story of cars and then real estate. You have, and he grew up, and he shows you the old house where he grew up. So every coach has a story. There's a story from where you started. There's a story of what you wanted to be when you were a little kid. There's a story of how you were always the banker in Monopoly, and now look, you're a financial advisor. There's a story of how, what's that, Marie Kondo? No, Kondo, right? How she liked organizing stuff as a kid, and now she does that. Like, there's got to be a story, and in that story you will find color, you will find analogies. So in mine, my book is called Step into the Spotlight, because a guide to getting noticed, because all business is show business, right? And so I've been in shows my whole life. I've been on stage, I've done comedy on TV, I have a music CD out, all that stuff. So that analogy, that framework, that metaphor works for my book. You have to find your metaphor, find your framework, find your analogy, find your story.
That's what I think I want to give people as the takeaway right there. That's what I think is that they can digest everything we've said here down into that. Guys, let's break that down for a second. That's perfect, Tsufit. Many of you, most of you, don't yet have your story. What you do have is a little bit of, I'm going to call it, like, in the way that you show up online, instead of your story, you have your vignette or your anecdote. It's not enough yet. You haven't fleshed it out enough to do what Tsufit just said, which is, once you have the story, within the story, you find the framework to create corollaries.
And to create your own language.
And to create your own language. That's
right? So for example, in my book, I say, be your own casting director. You know, I've got like probably 100, 200, 300 different phrases like that, right? Even the chapter titles are all around this show business. Chapter 4, which is about speaking, is called Is This Thing On? With a picture of a microphone. Like, that's my analogy. So you have to figure out what yours is and let it infuse everything that you do. And that's what you're talking about, making it go deeper.
This is perfect. This is perfect. We got there, and I'm really excited. So then what do you guys do? How do you do this? You're sitting there watching us, and you're going, that's so exciting. That's great. And as soon as this is over, you're going to go, I don't know what to do next. You have to create your whole story. You've got to put your story out.
Don't create it. Find it. It already exists.
Find it, but create it on paper or in a document. Unearth it. Yeah, that's what I mean. I have a storytelling framework I use called the question mark story model. I'm going to see if hold on, let me just tag this. Give me just 1 second, you guys. Hope I didn't misspell that. My eyes are not what they used to be. I spelled it all right, so that's great. Now I'm going to tag my assistant. And I'm going to have her put in here a free access to that, to the framework that I use to help people with their signature story. It's the same one that I use to write my book about my life, which is interesting. And I don't want to get too far into it, but when I first came into the space, it was because I had written a book about my life. You will notice that on the surface, I don't do anything that has to do with life coaching or anything like that, which is the only way that somebody who wrote a story about their terribly hard life would use that story as an expert positioning tool. But what I want you to understand is that having written it down, my story now flows through my veins. My story is now right at my fingertips. And so it's exactly what you're talking about, Tsufit. I was born in a cult, and I think that that's a lot of the reason that I am very, very anti-guru. Like
that is
gurus do not want to get within arm's reach of me.
That is interesting. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And so this is great. This is the golden nugget that I had faith that we'd jump on this call and find.
And Manny, if you want to add to your whatever you tagged your assistant to add about your storybook method, I also have a series of tips about how to find your story and how to tell it in 30 seconds. If you like, it's just spotlightsecrets.com.
Great. I would love it. Yeah. So what we'll do, I'm going to, so for all of you guys out there, depending on when you see this, I'm going to have to go to my assistant, connect her with Tsufit, and get the freebie.
I just said it. Spotlightsecrets.com.
Oh, okay. So
www.
Sorry, my typing is, well, it's never been good. If I'm being honest. All right. So spotlightsecrets.com for your gift.
Yeah, you'll put your name and your email, and you'll get a series over time of how to stand out in 30 seconds. And by the way, there's another little freebie tip. If you've got something out there in the world, spend $10 with GoDaddy and get a forward so that you don't have to say, go to mannywolf.com/gift/story/this, right? And you don't have to tag your assistant in front of Spotlight. I mean, I do a ton of radio, a ton of podcasts, whatever. So everything that I have, go to spotlightsecrets.com. You want my book, go to spotlightbook.com. You want my LinkedIn group, go to spotlightgroup.biz. Like, pay for a few URLs and forward people. First of all, consistent with your brand. So whatever it is that your brand is called, have different versions that can roll off your tongue, and you never have to connect later. And because we live in a now culture.
Yeah. Good point. I am very happy with how this went. I really like that we got to something I consider to be very, very profound at the end. So I want to thank you for your time today.
My pleasure.
And I had no idea what to expect, but that's literally 4 for 4 of these interviews where I had no idea what to expect from the person coming on, and each one has been like spectacular.
Wow.
So you have not disappointed. You are you're keeping the faith.
Phew.
And I don't think we're going to have anybody who cakes the bed, but it wasn't you. So.
And with that lovely corollary message in the end, it's been a pleasure teasing you. And I look forward to teasing you again in the future.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.